am back with more notes on House of Leaves, and this time we are going to dive into the madness of Pelafina with the Whalestoe letters. Yeah. I hope you're ready. There is a lot going on here. I'll be referencing other videos that have been made as well, and hopefully this won't take too long. But let's just dive into it. As always, I'm not gonna edit anything, so it's me freestyling. Yeah, let's just go into it. So let's just talk about first the introduction page. Hopefully that didn't ruin the focus there. Anyways, Whalestoe could just be a really big toe or non-existent toe because whales don't have toes. But on page 587 we get reference to the big toe, where love resides. So love resides in the three-attic Whalestoe. It could also be a reference to Moby Dick and this idea of the white whale, the pursuit of a grand yet impossible idea. Three-attic. The only possible reference I could find to three-attic was a movie called Three in the Attic, in which three women trap a man in an attic to punish him after he dated all three of them at once. And we know there's lots of questions about Johnny's paternity and who his actual father is and who the actual author of House of Leaves is. And I thought it was interesting that in the movie there's three women, but in House of Leaves we have three men. We have Navidson, Zampano, and Johnny. And are they possibly all trapped in the attic, in the madhouse, with Pelafina? As in, in her mind. Did she think all these things up, create them? Okay, so let's dive into the first letter here, July 28th, 1982. She writes, also remember, love inhabits more than just the heart and mind. If need be, it can take shelter in a big toe. And feet are very important in House of Leaves. We got a lot of references to feet. Johnny stubs his toe, and he never finds love. I guess his toe never heals. Navidson also has problems with his feet, but his feet actually do heal. And then his relationship with his wife is also not necessarily fixed, but better. So he continues on in his love. And then I also asked this question here, what is Pelafina's white whale? I wrote P. I use a lot of initials in my notes. Instead of writing out Mark C. Danilewski all the time, I just write MZD. And Zampano is usually just at Z. So yeah, if you're looking at my notes, which I will have linked in the description down below, hopefully, if you've read House of Leaves and you're looking for more information in notes, you can understand that my notes and what they mean. They're not as indecipherable as House of Leaves is. Okay, down in this next letter we have this phrase, shape you with sloppy wet kisses. We also get a reference on the next page about her lick your wounds, swallow your hurts, and kisses mend you whole. So Pelafina is really obsessed with mouths and tongues. That's something I associate with her. And this also links to the Roman belief that bear cubs were born shapeless lumps and they were sculpted by their mother's tongues. And so I thought about this idea that tongues, words, Pelafina's trying to bring her son back to life or give him life with her words. This next page, at the top we have the greeting, Felicities Felix Feline. So Felicities is the ability to appropriately express one's thoughts. It also means good luck. Felix is from the Proto-Italic, meaning with young or to suckle, again with that mouth imagery there. It could also mean fortunate son. It's also a term in chess when one or more of the players are visually impaired to indicate where certain pieces on the board, and as we know, Zampano is blind. And there's also, it's also a very common cat name, to name your cat Felix, and Zampano is linked with cats as well. Lots of cat references in Hills of Leaves. Feline, another cat reference. And then I thought it was interesting the FFF, Felicity's Felix Feline, as a musical notation for forte fortissimo, which means as loud as can be played. So trying to get your voice out there and having it be incredibly overpowering. Okay, here we have a phrase, do they serve you hot chocolate and large slices of lemon meringue pie? And on page 320 we have Tom. The last thing that he eats is lemon meringue pie, and he makes hot chocolate for everyone. It's also the title of a song from the album Hello by Poe, who is Marcy Dunlevsky's sister. That's her stage name. And the album there was an album released by her that corresponds to House of Leaves as well. We have a lot of French in here. Au courant, on your travails. So means be aware in French. Okay, on the next page we have more French. Nouvelle mère, your new mother. As old, Goethe is how I'm gonna say it. I looked up how to pronounce this because I was getting frustrated. Goethe. He's also possibly referenced on page 123 when with the phrase "I call architecture frozen music." It's attributed to him. He wrote a play, a story called Faust, which is about Satan making a deal with God that he can deter Faust's pursuit for learning everything away from righteous pursuits. So Faust ends up trading his soul for the knowledge that Satan offers him, and it ends with Faust fathering an illegitimate child who is then drowned by the mother, killed by the mother. So again, references to childhood death and questionable paternity. She says, then cast no backward glances, which is a reference. I immediately thought of the biblical story of Lot and his wife. She turned back and turned into a pillar of salt. But it's probably more likely a reference to Eurydice and Orpheus. I apologize for any background noise you hear. My walls and ceiling are very thin. Eurydice and Orpheus, which is also a short poem by Goethe, which excludes the last lines here. What each day needs, that shalt thou ask, each day will set its proper task. I just thought that was interesting. It's a poem translated from German by T.H. Huxley in a letter he wrote about waiting for his son to be born. That son then died when he was 4 years old, and Johnny was 4 when Pelifina strangled him. So did Johnny die at 4 years old? February 14th, 1983 for an 11-year-old. So we can figure out Johnny's birthday for this. We are later told that Johnny's birthday is in June, so Johnny would have been born in 1971. On page 543, we get a reference in 9 months before June 1971 from Zampano saying maybe I could create a son. So, sorry, 9 months before Johnny's birthday, Zampano's talking about making up a son. Then we have down here, when you were born, you were declared an old soul. So we have the story of the dead baby, starting on page 518, and this poem, Echo Pue, by Joyce, which is about the death of his father and then the birth of his son. That happened around the same time, so this maybe the idea of like a reincarnation. This phrase was also used to describe Zampano on page 31 as well. Okay. Page 590 here. We have another French phrase, c'est vraiment triste, sure, which is French for it is very sad. And then we have a reference to the young cub. So Romulus and Remus, I thought could possibly be, they were suckled by a she-wolf, so were they wolf cubs? Romulus also ended up killing Remus. So fratricide, and we know chapter 11 was about biblical cases of fratricide as well, with Jacob and Esau and Cain and Abel. Over onto page 591, we get an interesting word. I am always looking up interesting words in House of Luis, and this word is modicum, from modus, meaning measure, or modicus, meaning moderate, which is about small quantities, so it's about taking appropriate measures. And then we have the reference to the Concise Oxford English Dictionary, the co-ed that is referenced by Johnny when he says, I learned that word from a co-ed. It could, the implication there that he intends seems to be that it's from like a female student, when in fact it is referencing a dictionary. It is also referenced again on page 594. Then we have Ponce de Leon, referenced down here, and he tried to find the Fountain of Youth. He was a real person, but the legend of his search is probably not real. So this idea of what's real and what's not real, again. And then we get a reference to a schoolgirl in dark green knee socks. And I was wondering, could this be a reference to Karen Green? Her last name's Green. And there's lots of links between Pelifina and Karen. I got page 315 for Karen and 616 for Pelifina, where they practice their smiles in the mirrors. They both wear pink ribbons on page 523 for Karen and 599 for Pelifina. So there's links between those two characters. Okay, page 592. Your letter arrived last week. I will wear it like a heart. That is the reference to the letter that is kept in the deer locket. And heart could also be H-A-R-T, which is another term for a deer. We got lots of references to this locket. Page 350, page 410, page 511, and page 644 all reference this locket that Johnny eventually sells. More kisses than you can count right there. This is actually a reference to a poem that they learned in Latin school called Catullus 5. So it's, give me 1,000 kisses, then 100, then another 1,000, then a second 100, then yet another 1,000, then 100. Then when we have performed many thousands, we will shake them into confusion. And it's interesting because Johnny on page 336 says, an ancient memory love had promised but finally never gave until there were too many kisses to count. So we see more links between them. June 21st here is Johnny's 12th birthday. We also, as I said there, September 21st, 1970 is where Zampano mentions that he is going to make up a son. Page 543. I could create a son. We have this reference to Bambino dell'Oro, which is baby of gold in Italian. And on page 626 we get a lot of references to this phrase, dell'Oro, Doro, Oro. It's a repetitive idea of gold. I hide this. Born on the day most suffused with sun, the longest day of the year. Your arms and legs seem made of water and changed with the tides. This could be a reference to Proteus, who is a Greek sea god, also called the Old Man of the Sea, or god of elusive sea change. He gives answers to people only if they're capable of catching him. So maybe like the reader's trying to capture Johnny looking for answers in the text, but it keeps changing. Carl Jung defined the mythological figure of Proteus as a personification of the unconscious. And this phrase from John Milton's Paradise Lost. I apologize for any noises you hear. Again, I'm not gonna edit, and they won't listen to me asking them to be quiet. Upstairs neighbors. Okay. In vain, though by their powerful art they bind volatile Hermes and call up unbound in various shapes old Proteus from the sea, drained through a limbic to his native form. So Hermes is referenced there, and Hermes is also related to the bald gnome error, which I talked about in previous videos. Gods assembled around you and offered you gifts. We know that he's often referred to as having the Aegis of Mars. On page 594 and on page 87, that's referenced. Over here, may your summer be full of root beer, joy, and play. We get references to summer root beer on pages 395 and 558 as well. Zampano has a poem about that. I've noticed throughout the text that the space between her ending phrase and her signing is slowly getting bigger and bigger. We have Solomon was a poor man. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines, so he had lots of love. Love in quotation marks. It's also interesting that there's a reference to the Key of Solomon, which is a grimoire attributed to King Solomon, but not actually written by him. So again, the question of authorship. So I copied this from Wiki. Solomon wrote the book for his son Rehoboam and commanded him to hide the book in his sepulchre upon his death. After many years, the book was discovered by a group of Babylonian philosophers preparing Solomon's tomb. None could interpret the text. So I'm going to stop there. Solomon, maybe Zampano, wrote the book for his son Rehoboam, maybe Johnny. And the book was hidden after his death. And then Johnny discovered the book in Zampano's death scene, the place where he died. None could interpret the text until one of them, Iohe Grievous, suggested that they should ask the Lord for understanding. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and extracted a promise that he would keep the text hidden from the unworthy and the wicked, after which he was able to read it plainly. Iohe Grievous then placed a spell on the book that the unworthy, the unwise, or those who did not fear God would not attain the desired effect from any of the workings contained in the book. It's also referenced, this book is referenced in Faust by Goethe, which we already discussed just previously. So I thought, that grimoire, the Key of Solomon, was interesting in relation to House of Leaves there in regards to trying to understand the book. I think Iohe Grievous would be like Mark Z. Danilewski, who's understood the book and is trying to give it to us, but we have to be worthy, we have to be wise, and we have to fear God to understand it. Sure. Then we get this Latin phrase, qui patrium potestum usurpavit, which is who usurps the power of the country or the father. The connection between all the father figures in Johnny's life is that they were actually soldiers fighting for country. So Johnny fought in the Pacific, Zampano fought in the Indochina War and the Vietnam War, and Raymond was a Marine. Yeah. Pugilism is an interesting word. It means boxing, and here we have the reference to co-ed. Here we have accoutrement of Mars. See also that Johnny is really aligned with Mars, the god. On page 495, it says he's in allegiance with Mars. On page 87, it says that he is wearing the very Aegis of Mars. So I thought that was interesting. And then it references a word he uses, changeling. He uses that word on page 49 of House of Leaves. And she says, did your co-ed teach this to you? So it's Pelafina replying to Johnny's writings from the future. And he also references the co-ed on page 35 as well. Corporeal detachment, my spirit unpaired speeds to your side. This is interesting because Johnny has a lot of panic attacks, so that's your... So one thing that happens is that you can feel detached from your body. And Johnny has panic attacks around the color purple, which is associated with Pelafina. So on pages 70-72, he has a panic attack. Page 403, 413, 501, and on page 6:30. I think 6:30 is the reference to the colors. But yeah, so those are when he has panic attacks. 595. We have this Old English phrase right here, which means great is the fear of the Lord before which the world stands still. It's from this poem called The Seafarer. Right here we have the Old English and then the English, the modern English version. This is also referenced on page 6050 as well. So it's a Old English poem about a man alone on the sea. And O.S. Anderson had this to say about the poem. The only way to find the true meaning of the seafarer is to approach it with an open mind and to concentrate on the actual wording, making a determined effort to penetrate what lies beneath the verbal surface. It's debated actually whether stuff was actually added to it, whether the two parts of the poem, which seem disparate, were actually part of the same poem or there were two different poems put together. And I thought this was an interesting... These are 3 interesting quotes from the poem in relation to House of Leaves. And now my spirit twists out of my breast, my spirit out in the waterways, over the whale's path it soars widely, through all corners of the world. It comes back to me eager and unsated. The lone flyer screams, urges onto the whale road the unresisting heart across the waves of sea. And there's a phrase, nor can the soul which is full of sin preserve the gold. And, you know, we got to remember that Pelafina called Johnny the gold baby. Before the fear of God, though he hid it before, while he was yet alive, great is the fear of the Lord, before which the world stands still. That's the quote that she uses. And let us ponder where we have our homes. Okay. Okay, page 596 now. We get a reference to Lear. The theme of... One of the themes of House of Leaves is parent-child love. And Lear goes mad after being told the truth by his daughter. And he runs into a storm. And the result of that is that all of Lear's children die. It's not very good summary of the King Lear play by Shakespeare, but that's the general idea in relation to House of Leaves. And then she makes a reference to your Pacific father. And that should probably be pacifist. So is this a reference, in fact, to the Pacific Arena in Vietnam? We know that the Vietnam War and the Indochina War are very relevant to House of Leaves. So we have specifically the Battle of Dien Bien Phu that we know Zhang Pano fought in. Yeah. On page 597, we get the phrase Semper Fi, which means always faithful. It's the motto of the Marines. We get a reference to Hecate, who is the goddess of magic and spells. She witnessed the abduction of Persephone to the underworld and helped search for her. So again, a lot of references to the underworld, people going into the underworld and coming back out from it as well. Interesting thing is that pillars called the Hecatea stood at crossroads and doorways to help keep evil spirits away. We get a reference to Acheron, which is the river of woe. It's one of the 5 rivers of the Greek underworld, and it's at the entrance to the underworld. And in Dante's Inferno, the Acheron forms the border of hell. So it's a very relevant river in reference to the underworld. You get a reference to murdering ministers, which is from Macbeth. Act 1, Scene 5, lines 47 to 54. Lady Macbeth says, "Come to my woman's breasts and take my milk for gall, you murdering ministers. Wherever in your sightless substances you wait on nature's mischief, come thick night, and pale thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife see not to the wound it makes, nor heaven peep through the blanket of the dark, to cry, hold, hold." Yeah, so that's the context of that phrase. Clytemnestra is also referenced here. She killed her husband after he sacrificed their daughter, and she also tried to kill her son. It's a lot of family murders in Greek plays. This should be on the other page, but anyways, we're going back here. Tear out the liver of your purported protector. Cast a great curse, take up immediate residence in his body. Oh, okay, so that's what this is. Okay, so tear out the liver of your purported protector, and then down here, it says, sorry, a great curse which shall fly directly on a dark wind and take up immediate residence in his body, daily chewing on his flesh. Nearly gnawing on his bones until many months from now, moments before the final spark of self-awareness expires, he will have witnessed the total dismemberment and consumption of every limb and organ. So that's in reference to Raymond, who was Johnny's foster father, and he was very abusive towards Johnny, and he actually dies of cancer. We're told that on page 325. Cancer had settled on Raymond's bones, riddling his liver and pancreas with holes. We also get this word fuit ilium, which means Troy has been or Troy is no more. It's also referenced on page 466 and page 562 as well. And then we get this Latin phrase, ira furor brevis est, and a part that's not included is animum rege, qui nisi perit imperit. I can barely speak English, don't ask me to speak Latin. And the full meaning is anger is a brief madness. Govern your mind, for unless it obeys, it commands. We're on page 598 now. We get a reference to Claudius. He's a character from Hamlet. He killed his brother and married his sister-in-law. He was killed by Hamlet. So we also get a reference to Polyphena being a Shakespearean mother, and the most famous Shakespearean mother, in my opinion, is Gertrude from Hamlet. So there's that tie there. Ugolino is a character from Dante. He's also known as the betrayer of kin. Apparently he ate his children after they died when they were all being left to starve to death. So I guess he saw them, they figured they were already dead and decided to eat them to save himself. It's referenced in Dante's Inferno. Page 599 over here, we have a reference to Hawthorne's faith and pink ribbons. And this is a story called Young Goodman Brown by Nathaniel Hawthorne. The story is basically Brown dreams his wife Faith is a witch and his whole world is not what he thinks it is. Faith wears pink ribbons in her hair. And this quote is from there. My faith is gone, there is no good on earth, and sin is but a name. Come devil for to thee this world given. And we also know that Karen wears pink ribbons in her hair as well. We also get a reference to Apollo scrambling over the cliffs. So Apollo was a god of archery, music, truth, healing, and the sun. Apollo's arrows shot the monster Python, who is a serpent living at the center of the earth, guarding the Omphalos at the Delphic oracle. And we have a lot of references to Polyphena possibly being to being the person at the oracle who interpreted things. The woman there, I can't remember what the name is. I'm sorry. It will come up. I'm drawing a blank right now. So Python was the son of Gaia, and Apollo had to kill him in order to take his rightful place there. And we have Apollo scrambling across the cliffs. This could possibly be in reference to the myth of Leucastes, who's a man who threw himself off a cliff to escape Apollo's romantic pursuit of him. So it means to free a person from obsessive love. There's also lots of nymphs who threw themselves off cliffs to escape from Apollo. He's a very rapey character, wasn't he? It could also be about the myth of Niobe, whose children were killed by Apollo, and she was transformed into a weeping rock on a cliff to forever mourn her loss. So again, a mother losing her children. A reference to Odysseus as well, who's the hero of the Odyssey. It's journey that took him 10 years to get home after the Trojan War. A reference to Hermes again. I talk a lot about the bald gnome error in previous videos. That's linked to Hermes. He's also the protector of travelers. He moves freely between the worlds of mortal and divine. He guides soul to the afterlife, and he's referenced multiple times, directly or indirectly, throughout HoL. And then we have this mistake here, Tormi to Pisces, which should be pieces, and that same mistake is also made on page 41 as well. So, same mistake twice. There are no errors in House of Leaves. Okay, page 600. Double dunk you in the river Styx. So neither head nor heel up here, this phrase. It's a reference to Achilles' mother, who dunked him into the river Styx to make him invulnerable, but she had to hold him by the heel to dunk him in, and that heel is his weakness. Your Achilles' heel is your weakness. And we both know that Johnny and Navidson have a problem with their feet. We have this phrase, do not succumb to the facile and inadequate amazements of liquor and pills. And on page 49, actually, we have Johnny saying a version of this phrase, saying, inside me a long dark hallway, despite the amazement of chemicals. Okay. Page 601 up here. We have this Old English again. That's again from the Battle of Maldon. It's an Old English poem. The translation is, heart must be braver, courage the bolder, mood the stouter, as our strength grows less. And on page 71, we have Malden or no Malden, that phrase mentioned by Johnny, so he's aware of this Old English poem. We have then this phrase down here, honi soit qui mali pense, shame be to him who thinks evil of it, which was said by Edward III of England when he claimed the French throne. Apparently it originated when Edward III was dancing with his daughter-in-law, and her garter fell and caused others to laugh at her humiliation, so Edward III picked it up and put it on his own leg and then said this phrase as well, shame be to him who thinks evil of it. So Edward III founded this Order of the Garter in reference to that. On page 602, we have this phrase, non sum qualis eram, I am not what I once was. On page 71, I am going to actually flip through and show you this. Page 71. We have Johnny saying, known some call is eram. So it's kind of sounding it out in the English version there. Yeah, and it is from Horace's Odes. I'll open that up here. There's some odes there, particularly 4.1, which is this right here, this poem, which is about a man who doesn't want to fall in love again and asks Venuses to spare him and chase someone who will worship her properly, but he still yearns for her love despite that. And this is the relevant phrase. But me I find no woman nor boy, nor true love's trusting hope delights me now. At night now in my dreams I hold you fast, I scramble after as you lightly glide. Beyond the field of Mars I follow you and plunge unpitied in the churning tide. On page 603, we have this line. And in between the lines of this one and the one on page 634, she does not sign mummy anymore. So reading between the lines. On page 604, we get a reference to Orpheus, who went to the afterlife to retrieve Eurydice, his wife. Was told not to look back, but he did, and she was sent back to the afterlife. So they were separated forever. Referenced multiple times in House of Leaves. We have this phrase in Spanish, si nunca te fueras, which is if you never were or if you never left. Here we get references to the Black Forests, which is a mountain range in Germany. the Dead Seas, which is a salt lake in the Mediterranean. And then your tale telling Stilled Wind, which reminded me of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. So it's about a man who's cursed to tell his story after stilling his ship and condemning his crew after he killed an albatross. So he's enforced to tell his story, the tale telling, stilled wind, so his ship was stilled, the wind wasn't there, and the bird. So that's what made me think of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. It's also referenced possibly on page 17 and on page 394 as well. Seafarers, that poem is quoted on page 595 by Pelopina. Love the Stars. Stars are also referenced on page 23, 509, and 545 as well. So just thought that was interesting to note. Page 606, The Only Son I'll Have. That just reminded me of John 3:16. For God so loved the world, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. I thought that was interesting. That we get a lot of references now to Jesus and Mary in Pelopina's letters. Jesus being Johnny and her being Mary. And then we have this phrase, rompido mi muñeca, which is Spanish for I broke my doll or my wrist. Can mean either one. It's a euphemism for slitting your wrists. So we got a lot of references to wrists as well. On page 5, page 11, and page 91, we get references to Daisy as Navidson's daughter, her wrists being cut. On page 315, we learned that Daisy also has a Spanish doll. And on page 561, Zampano has a poem about wrists. So there's a lot of wrists connections. Yeah, and that's all on this page. On page 608, I shall think twice next time. I didn't highlight it again. Dishing out poached. Okay, it's a bit of a tongue twister. Dishing out poached portions dolloped with dill sauce. So this alliteration of P and D words. So could be like Pelopina and Donnie. Donnie being Johnny's, who we think is Johnny's like real father. The man who raised him while Pelopina was in the prison until he died. Not prison, the asylum. Okay. 609. In your next letter, a check mark in the lower right hand corner. And we do get that. Page 97. Might have noticed it before. Wonder what the heck is that? We have our little check mark down here. So that's like a clue for a lot of people that like something is going on in this book time wise, like what's going on. And another reference to codes here as well to keep an eye open for them. So penniless check. I wrote that about like the previous letter, the check mark. So it's a reference to the check mark instead of a check with money on it. So it's a penniless check. And then we have a reference to Daddy Warbucks. He's the adoptive father of little orphan Annie. So again, father figures. Bind Me Like a Chinese Doll, which is a reference to China dolls which had ribbons in their hair. So the pink ribbons. Or it could possibly be a reference to binding of feet on Chinese women so that they couldn't walk. Here we get a reference to her Spanish doll. Again, we just talked about. And then HoL, which is actually a common name for caves, and there is one in West Virginia and one in California. This one, I believe, is in California. Yeah, this one's in California. which I thought was really cool. Let's open the image to like look at it. Like it's pretty cool. And right here, there's a place called the Hall of Faces. Oh, it's creepy. I'll show you pictures. Oh no, it's not. Oh, it didn't load the whole thing. 1 second, let me just copy and paste this whole thing. Like this. These are all carved into the walls. Like, isn't that creepy? Yeah. I'm actually not going to have that on there. It's also the name of a 1985 movie about a woman sent to a mental institution where the doctors experiment on the residents with lobotomies. So it's also a reference to mental institutions where, you know, Peloponnesian one. Page 611, we get this reference to Sisyphean tasks. So Sisyphus was tasked with pushing a boulder up a hill, and he'd have it slide back down, and he'd have to do it again. And Sisyphus was punished for chaining up Thanatos so that no one on Earth died. I thought that was interesting. Thanatos is also referenced on page 387. Sisyphus actually pauses his task to listen to Orpheus' song for Eurydice as well. So there's another reference to Orpheus and Eurydice. And here we have, again, my darling Jay, I remain your only Mary. So is that a reference to Jesus and Mary? And then which Mary? Is it Mother Mary, the Virgin Mary, or is it Mary Magdalene, who sometimes is, some people thought was his wife. Yeah. So is his father God? Is his Shakespearean mother incestuous? Who knows? I have no notes on this page, but I have notes on page 613. We have the Latin phrase fortis fortunis juvat, which is fortune favors the bold. I know it looks like I have a lot of notes written here, but they're not relevant. They're just things that I was thinking of at the time, my own personal thoughts, as opposed to anything that I could really translate to other people. Page 614, we have a reference to Mrs. Havisham's wedding dress right there. It goes up in flames. It should be Miss Havisham's dress, not Mrs. Havisham's dress, because she was never married. She was left at the altar, which led to a mental breakdown for her, and she never left her house. She wears her wedding dress for the rest of her life until it catches fire, and the burns from that cause her death weeks later, so she suffers. We have this untie the world instead of unite the world, or is that intentional? You know, such an awful place, continuously blushed with rot. This reminded me of The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. So that story is about Roderick, who believes the house that he lives in is alive, and it entombs his sister. He entombs his sister alive, who escapes, but in a fit of rage attacks her brother, and they both die. The house in The Fall of the House of Usher ends up splitting in half, and it sinks, and that's what happens in House of Leaves on page 346. The house splits in half, and it starts to sink into the hallway. There's a poem in the story called The Haunted Palace, and it mentions the king named Porphyrogene. Oh gosh, this Porphyrogene. That's how I'm going to say it. Whose name means purple-born, and purple is associated with Polyphena. And you can read the poem here. Yeah, it's not that long. Let's read it. In the greenest of our valleys, by good angels tenanted, once a fair and stately palace, radiant palace, reared its head. In the monarch thought's dominion it stood there, never seraph spread a pinion over fabric half so fair. Banners yellow, glorious golden, on its roof did float and flow. All this was in the olden time long ago. And every gentle air that dallied in that sweet day, along the ramparts plumed and pallid, a winged order went away. Wanderers in that happy valley through two luminous windows saw spirits moving musically to a lute's well-tuned law. Round about a throne where sitting Porphyrogene, in state his glory well befitting the ruler of the realm was seen. And all with pearl and ruby glowing was the fair palace door, through which came flowing, and sparkling evermore, a troop of echoes whose sweet duty was but to sing, in voices of surpassing beauty, the wit and wisdom of their king. But evil things in robes of sorrow assailed the monarch's high estate. A let us mourn, for never morrow shall dawn upon him desolate. And round about his home the glory that blushed and bloomed is but a dim remembered story of the old time entombed. And travellers now within that valley through the red-lit window see vast forms that move fantastically to a discordant melody, while like a ghastly rapid river through the pale door, a hideous throng rush out forever and laugh but smile no more. So yeah, it's interesting because Poe said about the fall of the House of Usher that I mean to imply a mind haunted by phantoms, a disordered brain. Okay, on page 615 we get a list of colors. Madder, Azure, Celadon, and Gamboge. So madder could possibly be referring to rose madder, which can cause birth defects and miscarriages. The plant, rose madder, and it's used as a red dye for fabric. It's also interesting because that kind of color pill could be quetiapine, which is used in the treatment of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Azure is a color between blue and cyan. It's the color of the sky. Could the blue pill refer to the Matrix, I thought? Maybe because it would be a maybe because the Matrix came out in 1999 and the book was published in 2000, so would it have been tight enough to do that? I don't know. It could maybe be a reference to azurite, which is a birth control pill. Celadon is a pale green blue. It's named after a shepherd who wore green ribbons in the French novel L'Astrie by Henri Durf, which is a love story between a shepherd and a shepherdess. It's the origin of Celadonia, which is a love that is purely spiritual. It could be the color of that pill could be aripiprazole, which is an antipsychotic used to treat schizophrenia. Gamboge is a deep saffron to mustard yellow. The plant is used as laxative, and the pill color of olanzapine is similar to that, used in the treatment of schizophrenia, bipolar, and OCD. And the colors of these pills are the same color as Tom's keys. They are red, blue, green, and yellow. Then we have this phrase, many years destroyed, endless arrangements, re zealous accommodations, medical prescriptions, and endless other wonders, however obvious, debilitating indeed, you ought understand, letting such evil occur. And if you take the first letter of each of those words, it says, my dear Zampano, who did you lose? And then we have here again, practicing my smile in a mirror. And we know Karen also did that on page 316. Page 616, we have the phrase lagrima. Spanish, if you put those two words together, lagrima means teardrop. In Latin, it would be lacrimosa, which is part of the Catholic Requiem Mass. And the part of the Mass to say that is sung in the English is, full of tears will be that day when from the ashes shall arise the guilty man to be judged. Therefore spare him, O God, merciful Lord Jesus, grant them eternal rest. Amen. And it was actually put to music by Mozart, but he died before he completed it. And there's a debate as to whether the completion by his student is good enough, and other composers have tried to complete it. So again, we have that idea of this unfinished thing being picked up by someone else. So like the House of Leaves text left by Zampano was picked up by Johnny and completed. Or was it? And is it good enough? On page 617, we have some marauding rabbit devoured with the leaves. Could this possibly be a reference to Thumper, Johnny's crush, I guess, for lack of a better word? Could it be a reference to the rabbit from Alice in Wonderland? It could also be Pelafina's last name is Livre, which means hare or rabbit in French. And then we have this phrase, the woman you lingered with was not me. Some other mother? Could this be a different kind of mother? Possibly Johnny with an IE, the mother of all strays. I talked about that in a previous video about this idea of Eve versus Lilith. Yeah. Okay, page 618. We have Esprit de l'escalier. Sure, which is a French phrase meaning that you think of the perfect reply too late. It means a staircase wit. So you walk away from the conversation and think of the perfect response to what someone said after the case. On page 78, we have Johnny saying, "In the spirit of the staircase," and then the footnote to that links us to this appendix. So that's interesting, these staircases. Then we have this Spanish phrase, "Busca-me, suélame, recuerde-me," which is look for me, take care of me, need me, or require me. Okay. On page 620. Okay, so this is a letter that has to be interpreted, where you take the first letter of every sentence and interpret it. But I'm just going to go through and talk about some words that I found were interesting in here. So seraphim is the highest order of angels in Christianity, but Mark Ziedanowski is Jewish, and they are the fifth in Jewish hierarchy, which I thought was interesting. The Hebrew word for seraphim is malach. I don't speak Hebrew, so that's what I'm saying. And it's the word for messenger, and could that possibly be a link there to Hermes? Seraph in Hebrew means burning, and we know Johnny's been burned, physically, like actually burned. And there's this quote from Isaiah 6, 1-3. "Above it stood the seraphim, each one had 6 wings. With twain he covered his face, and with twain he covered his feet, and with twain he did fly." Then we have this word rectopathic, which is someone who is easily hurt emotionally. Ohms is a unit of electrical resistance. Yep. Honoric is relating to dreams. In honoric, trespasses may be referencing nightmares. Ironic means aiming at peace or consolation. Every yell delivered at ironic tables, you're yelling and fighting for peace there, I guess. The Raven Kings could be a reference to Bran the Blessed, or because Bran means raven in Welsh. He's a king associated with a magic cauldron that could restore the dead to life. So again, this idea of Pelifina bringing Johnny back to life. Antinomies is a contradiction between two beliefs. Eidetic, so if you have an eidetic memory, you could recall things with high precision. There's a lot of words with IC at the end, a lot of ick words, which I phrased out to mean IC. The next page, we have a reference to Hamlet. Lots of references to Hamlet. I just reference back to page 598. Ambages is an indirect way of talking or indirect roots. This is it, the Sibyl. That's the word I was looking for, the Cumaean Sibyl, in reference to the Oracle at Delphi. This from her cell, Cumaean Sibyl sings ambiguous ambages. The cloister rings with the shrill sound thereof in most dark stains. And Pelifina calls herself on page 642 the Cumaean Sibyl. Euphony means a pronunciation of symbols that are pleasing to the ear. It's from a Greek word meaning good voice. And Pelifina is obsessed with words and mouths and stuff like that. Gaping arcs, fleeing terrors, encroaching right, and terrifying sin. Could this possibly be a reference to Noah's Ark? The world was flooded due to sin. There's lots of references to boats and waters and sinking. Atrocity, sinking. Yeah. Numbskulls is a stupid person. I got this quote from Stephen Zweig. Only a numbskull is pleased at being a so-called success with woman. Only a dunderhead is puffed up by that. It was like lewd and Johnny. are numbskulls. Nave, it's the middle part of a church. It's an architectural term, so Pelafina is familiar with architecture and architectural terms. It could also be the hub of a wheel, and it's also quoted in Hamlet. Out, out, thou strumpet, fortuned all you gods, in general synod take away her power, break all the spokes and fellies from her wheel, and bowl the round nave down the hill of heaven. That's the Hecuba speech about the fall of Troy during the play within a play. So we get a reference to Troy, which is referenced multiple times, the Trojan War, referenced multiple times in House of Leaves. A play within a play. We have a book within a book within a movie within a book within a book. I confuse myself. And then means a name. I wrote out the meaning of the different names on my notes on page 17. Okay. Nam could possibly be a reference to Vietnam. Both Navi and Zampano fought in Vietnam. Taklamakan is a desert in China. It means place of no return, or get in and you'll never get out, kind of like the house. It's home to the Bezeklik 1,000 Buddha caves, which are man-made caves. And caving is important in House of Leaves. Unsung paternally. I just wrote daddy issues down there. God in vain, which is one of the 10 Commandments. It also includes obey thy mother and thy father. Icy falls, mountaineering on ice. We have the Kumbal Icefall referenced on the Everest climb on page 338. Enjambed, it's a poetry term meaning to carry a sentence over to the next line without a pause, from the French word meaning to straddle or encroach. Inducible means to draw or bring out, to infer or work out from given facts, or to direct the course of something. Ekdisias is a fancy word for stripper, and thumper is a stripper. And it could also mean extricate, to loathe, abhor, hate, to invoke a curse, or to swear. And on page 597 we see Pelafina had put a curse on Raymond. How many more pages are there left? We are at an hour already. I'm just going to finish reading the decoded part of this letter, and actually I'm going to do that. No, yeah, let's just read the decoded part of the letter, and then I'm going to do a part 2 to this video. So this is what the letter says. Dearest Johnny, they have found a way to break me, rape a 56-year-old bag of bones. There is no worse, and don't believe otherwise. The attendants do it, others do it, not every day, not every week, maybe not even every month, but they do it. Someone I don't know always comes when it's dark, late. I've learned not to scream. Screaming gave me hope, and unanswered hope is shattered hope. Think of your Haitian. It is far saner to choose rape than shattered hope, so I submit and I drift. I let caprice and a certain degree of free association take me away. Sometimes I'm still away long after it's done. After he's gone, the stranger, the attendant, the custodian, the janitor, cleaning man, waiting man, dirty man. The night tidying up after him. I am in hell, giving into heaven, where I sometimes think of your beautiful father with his dreamy wings, and only then do I allow myself to cry. Not because your mother was raped again, but because she loved so much that she could never have been allowed to keep. Such a silly girl. You must save me, Johnny. In the name of your father, I must escape this place or I will die. A face in a cloud, not a trace in the crowd. I, Pelafina. And there's another code in the letter. If you take all the capital letters in that phrase, it says a face in a cloud, no trace in the crowd. So I'm going to stop there. So this will be part 1, and I'll do a part 2 of the Pelafina letters. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think of this section of House of Leaves, and have a good day.